I'm standing in the lobby of Marcello's, the most expensive Italian restaurant in Charlotte, North Carolina, wearing a suit I haven't worn in 3 years, holding a manila envelope thick enough to change the rest of my life. My wife is inside. She's at table 9, the corner booth with the candles and the leather seats, the one you have to reserve 6 weeks in advance. She's sitting across from a man I've never met, laughing the way she used to laugh with me. She's wearing the emerald dress, my anniversary gift to her. And she's ordered the tasting menu. 7 courses. $312 per person before wine. She doesn't know I'm here. She doesn't know about the envelope. And she absolutely does not know that the waiter walking toward her table right now, the one carrying a small black leather check presenter, is about to hand her something that will unravel everything she's built in the last 4 years. My name is David Mercer. I'm 44 years old. I'm a structural engineer with 21 years in the field. I've designed load-bearing systems for hospitals, schools, bridges, and high-rises across the Southeast. I know how to calculate stress. I know how to find the weak point in any structure. And for 4 years, my wife has been treating me like I'm the weak point. Before I continue, I need you to understand something. I'm not telling you this story because I'm angry. I was angry. God, I was angry. But that passed. I'm telling you this story because of what I found. Because of what she did. Because every single night for over 3 years, I sat at my own kitchen table eating reheated leftovers, day-old pasta, cold chicken from 2 nights ago, while my wife told me she was cutting costs and being responsible with our budget. She said we couldn't afford to eat out. She said we needed to save. She said I needed to stop being so entitled about food that plenty of people would be grateful to have what we had. And I believed her. I believed every single word. Because I trusted her. Because she was my wife. Because when you love someone, you don't audit their grocery receipts. You don't question why dinner is always leftovers on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You don't wonder where the money is actually going. You just eat the cold pasta and say thank you. But here's what I didn't know. While I was scraping the bottom of a Tupperware container at 9 o'clock at night after a 12-hour shift, my wife was sitting in restaurants like Marcello's, 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. Appetizers, entrees, dessert, cocktails. She was dining at places I couldn't name, spending money I didn't know was missing, living a life I didn't know existed. And she was charging every single meal to a credit card. My credit card. A card I didn't even know I had. Now listen. I know what you're thinking. How does a man not know about his own credit card? How does an engineer, a man who calculates tolerances down to the 100th of a millimeter, miss something that obvious? I'll explain all of it. I'll show you how she did it, piece by piece, because once I started pulling the thread, the whole thing came apart in a way I never could have imagined. This wasn't just a woman eating behind her husband's back. This was a system, a financial architecture built on deception, and I was the foundation she was standing on. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the moment it started. The night I came home to an empty fridge, an empty house, and a bank notification on my phone that I was never supposed to see. That's when I realized my marriage wasn't a marriage. It was a transaction. And I was the only one paying. I met Vanessa Cole at a friend's barbecue in June of 2018. I was 40 years old, twice divorced. Wait, no. Let me correct that. I was 40, never married, and starting to think maybe that was just how it was going to be. I'd had relationships, good ones even. But my work consumed me. I traveled constantly, job sites in Raleigh, Greenville, Asheville, sometimes as far as Atlanta, and that kind of schedule isn't kind to romance. Women got tired of canceled dinners and rescheduled weekends. I didn't blame them. So when I showed up at Marcus Peterson's 4th of July cookout with a six-pack and zero expectations, I wasn't looking for anything. Vanessa found me. She was 36, dark hair, bright eyes, and she had this way of looking at you when you talked, like you were the only interesting thing in the room. She asked me what I did. I told her. Most people's eyes glaze over when you say structural engineer. Hers didn't. So you build things that hold other things up, she said. That's one way to put it. I like that. I like people who hold things up. We talked for 2 hours. She told me she worked in medical billing for a clinic in South Charlotte. She told me she'd been married once before, briefly in her 20s, and that it ended because he was careless with her trust. She told me she valued honesty above everything, stability, partnership. She said she'd rather eat rice and beans with someone loyal than steak with someone who lied. I remember that line because of how much it meant to me at the time, and because of how much it disgusts me now. We dated for 14 months. I was cautious. I took my time. I introduced her to Marcus and his wife, Linda, and they liked her. My mother liked her. My colleague Brian, who I'd worked with for 15 years, said she seemed solid. That was high praise from Brian. He didn't trust anyone. Vanessa moved into my house in September of 2019. It was a 4-bedroom in the Ballantyne area, South Charlotte. I'd bought it in 2015 with cash from a bonus after the Morrison Bridge retrofit project. No mortgage. It was mine, free and clear, and it was the first real home I'd ever owned. Vanessa loved it. She said it felt like a place where you could build a life. We married in March 2020. Small ceremony. Just 12 people in the backyard because of the pandemic. She wore a white sundress, and I wore a blue button-down, and we said our vows under the dogwood tree. It was simple. It was honest. It was the happiest day of my life. For the first year, things were good. Normal good. We cooked together on weekends. She handled the grocery shopping because she said she enjoyed it, and I was happy to let her. I handled the mortgage. Well, there was no mortgage, but I handled property taxes, insurance, utilities, car payments, maintenance. I earned well. My salary at Hargrove and Tillman Engineering was $168,000 a year, with bonuses that pushed it past $200 in good years. Vanessa's medical billing job paid around $52,000. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. Very comfortable. That's when the first shift happened. It was gradual. So gradual I didn't notice it happening, like a foundation settling a 1/4 inch per year. Invisible until the cracks show. It started with the groceries. Sometime around mid-2021, Vanessa started talking about our food budget. She said we were spending too much on groceries. She said she'd read an article about how the average American family wastes 30% of the food they buy. She said we should be smarter. I agreed. That sounded reasonable. She started buying less, smaller portions, more store-brand items. She said she was meal planning to reduce waste. And she started cooking in larger batches. A big pot of chili on Sunday that would last until Wednesday. A casserole on Thursday that would carry us through Saturday. I didn't mind. I'm not a food snob. I grew up in a house where my mother made a pot of soup last a week. I was raised to be grateful for what was on the table. But then the leftovers started. By early 2022, something had shifted further. Vanessa would cook a big meal on Sunday, roast chicken maybe, or a lasagna, and that was it. Monday through Friday, I came home to leftovers, reheated, sometimes twice. By Thursday, the chicken was dry. By Friday, the lasagna had that rubbery texture that tells you the microwave has done all it can. I mentioned it once, casually. Hey, maybe we could do something fresh on Wednesday? Even just a simple stir-fry? She looked at me like I'd suggested we buy a yacht. David, do you know how much fresh produce costs right now? We're in an inflation crisis. I'm trying to keep us under budget. What budget? We're fine financially. We're fine because I'm careful. You don't see what I see at the grocery store. Prices are up 30–40% on some items. We need to be responsible. I let it go. I let it go because she said it with such conviction. Because she had the numbers. She'd show me receipts, point to the totals, shake her head at the cost of bell peppers. And because questioning her felt like questioning her effort. She was the one doing the shopping, doing the cooking, doing the planning. Who was I to complain about leftovers when she was putting in the work? So I ate the leftovers, Monday through Friday. Week after week. Month after month. I started keeping protein bars in my desk at work. I'd grab fast food on the way home sometimes. A drive-through burger that I'd eat in the parking lot before walking in the door, because I didn't want Vanessa to think I was ungrateful. I was eating in my car like a teenager hiding from his parents. And I told myself this was normal. Here's the first anomaly. In March of 2022, I came home early on a Tuesday. My afternoon meeting had been canceled, and I walked in the door around 3 o'clock. Vanessa wasn't home. She was still at work, or so I assumed. I went to the kitchen to get water, and I noticed the trash can was full. I pulled the bag to take it out, and something caught my eye. A receipt. Not a grocery receipt. A restaurant receipt. It was from a place called Côte Brasserie, a French bistro in the South Park area. The total was $114, 2 entrees, a bottle of wine, dessert. The date was from the previous Saturday, a Saturday when Vanessa had told me she was going to lunch with her friend Diane. I looked at the receipt again. 2 entrees. One was a steak frites, $38. The other was a duck confit, $42. $114 for lunch. And we couldn't afford fresh vegetables on a Wednesday. I almost said something. I held the receipt in my hand for a full minute, standing over the kitchen trash can, trying to decide. But then I thought, she went to lunch with Diane. People spend money at restaurants with friends. That's normal. I can't be the husband who polices his wife's occasional lunch. So I put the receipt back in the trash. I didn't say a word. That was my first mistake. Not because I should have confronted her. I didn't have enough information for that. My mistake was that I didn't start paying attention. I saw the crack in the foundation, and I told myself it was cosmetic. It wasn't. The second anomaly came 2 months later, May 2022. I was looking for a phone charger in the junk drawer of our kitchen island, the drawer where everything goes to die. Vanessa's purse was on the counter, and it had tipped over. A small card had fallen out and slid partially under the toaster. I picked it up. It was a loyalty card, the kind restaurants give you. Buy 10 meals, get 1 free. It was from a steakhouse called Porter and Fig, over in the Dilworth neighborhood. High-end, the kind of place with dim lighting and $60 steaks. The card had 7 stamps on it. 7 visits. I'd never heard Vanessa mention Porter and Fig. Not once. I didn't even know she liked steak. She'd told me years ago that she preferred lighter meals, which was part of her reasoning for the smaller grocery portions. 7 visits to a steakhouse I'd never heard of. I put the card back in her purse. And that night, I ate leftover minestrone from Sunday, while Vanessa told me she had a headache and went to bed early. I didn't sleep well. Something was off. I could feel it the way I can feel when a load calculation doesn't balance. There's a number that doesn't fit. And even if you can't see it yet, you know it's there. But I still didn't act. Not yet. The thing that changed everything happened on a Thursday night in July 2022. I was sitting at the kitchen table at 9:15, eating reheated leftover chicken and rice. The chicken was from the previous Sunday, and it had that telltale gray tinge at the edges, when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank. Chase. Your card ending in 4471 has been charged $287.53 at Marcello's restaurant, Charlotte, North Carolina. I stared at it. I read it again. Card ending in 4471. I pulled out my wallet. My Chase debit card ended in 8806. My Visa credit card ended in 3192. I had no card ending in 4471. I opened the Chase app. I logged in. And there it was, an account I'd never seen before. A Chase credit card. Opened in my name. With a credit limit of $15,000 and a current balance of $11,642. My hands went cold. I scrolled through the transactions. Marcello's, Porter and Fig, Côte Brasserie, Sullivan's Steakhouse, Dogwood Southern Table, Fig Tree Restaurant, BLT Steak, Steak 48, restaurants, all of them, dozens and dozens of charges. 300 here, 200 there. Some weeks, 4 charges in 5 days. Going back 18 months. 18 months of restaurant charges on a credit card in my name that I had never opened, never signed for, never seen. My wife was sitting somewhere right now, at this very moment, spending $287 on dinner at Marcello's, and I was eating gray chicken. I set down my fork. I closed the app, and I did not panic. I'm an engineer. When I find a structural failure, I don't start tearing walls down. I assess. I document. I trace the failure back to its origin, calculate its extent, and determine the safest course of correction. I stayed calm. I needed proof. I opened my laptop, created a new folder on my desktop, and named it Project Integrity. Then I took a screenshot of every single transaction on that credit card. All 147 of them. The next morning, I woke up before Vanessa. That wasn't unusual. I always left for work by 6:30. What was unusual was that I sat in my truck in the driveway for 20 minutes before starting the engine, scrolling through those transactions on my phone, sorting them by date, looking for patterns. And patterns I found. The charges clustered around specific days. Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays. Occasionally a Friday. Almost never a Monday or Wednesday. That told me something. Those were the nights she was going out. The nights she told me she was having dinner with Diane, or working late at the clinic, or going to her book club. Book club met on Thursdays. Porter and Fig charges appeared on Thursdays. I drove to work with my jaw clenched so tight my molars ached, but I did not call her. I did not text her. I did not do a single thing that might alert her that I knew, because here's what I understood even in those first 12 hours. If I confronted her now, she'd have an explanation. She always had an explanation. She'd say the card was a mistake, or she'd opened it for emergencies, or she'd gaslight me into believing I'd forgotten about it, and I'd be left with nothing but an argument and no resolution. I needed more than a bank notification. I needed the full picture. Evidence drop number 1. The credit card application. That morning at work, I called Chase from my office with the door closed. I told them I'd noticed an account I didn't recognize. The representative confirmed. A Chase Sapphire Reserve card had been opened in my name in January 2021, 18 months ago. Using my social security number, my date of birth, and my home address, the application had been submitted online. Can you tell me what email address was used for the application? I asked. Yes, sir. The email on file is d.mercer.personal@gmail.com. That wasn't my email. My email was david.mercer.eng@gmail.com, the one I'd used for years. Someone had created a near-identical email address and used it to open a credit card in my name. I asked the representative to send me a copy of the original application. She said she'd mail it to the address on file, my home address. I told her I needed it sent to my office instead. I gave her the Hargrove and Tillman address. She hesitated, but agreed after I verified my identity with 3 security questions. I thanked her, hung up. Then I opened an incognito browser window and searched for d.mercer.personal@gmail.com. Nothing public came up. But I knew that email existed, and I knew who had created it. That evening, I came home at my usual time. Vanessa was in the kitchen, reheating leftover beef stew from the weekend. She smiled when I walked in. Same smile, same warmth. Hey babe, dinner's almost ready. Smells good, I said. It's better the second time around. The flavors develop. That's what they say. I sat at the table. I ate the stew. I told her about my day. A routine site inspection, nothing dramatic. She told me about hers. A billing dispute with an insurance company, the usual headaches. Normal. Completely normal. Except now I was watching. I watched her phone. She kept it face down on the counter, which she'd always done. I'd never thought anything of it. But now I noticed that whenever it buzzed, she'd glance at it, then flip it back over without reading it in front of me. I watched her purse. She'd hung it on the hook by the door, same as always. But when she went to the bathroom after dinner, I noticed she took the purse with her. She took her purse to the bathroom. I filed that away. Evidence drop number 2. The fake email recovery. The next day at work, I tried something. I went to Gmail's account recovery page and entered d.mercer.personal@gmail.com. I clicked Forgot Password. Google asked me to verify, and it showed a partial phone number associated with the account. The last 2 digits were 18. Vanessa's phone number ended in 18. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen for a long time. My wife had created a fake email address using a variation of my name, linked it to her own phone number, and used it to open a credit card in my name. This wasn't an impulse. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was planned, calculated, deliberate. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right there on my screen. I took a screenshot, saved it to the Project Integrity folder. Over the next 2 weeks, I built a routine. During the day, I gathered information. In the evening, I acted normal. I ate the leftovers. I watched TV with Vanessa. I went to bed at the usual time. And after she fell asleep, I'd lie there in the dark, running numbers in my head, tracing the structure of what she'd built. Because that's what it was. A structure. And like any structure, it had components. Component 1, the credit card, opened in my name without my knowledge or consent, used exclusively for restaurant charges. Component 2, the narrative, the constant talk about budget, inflation, food waste, the guilt trips when I mentioned fresh food, the framing of leftovers as responsible, even virtuous. This was the cover story. the social engineering that kept me from asking questions. Component 3, the schedule. Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays. The nights she had plans that took her out of the house. Book club, Diane, work events, always plausible, always uncheckable. But who was she dining with? Evidence drop number 3, the restaurant reservation records. I couldn't just walk into Marcello's and ask who my wife had been eating with, but I could do something else. I called Porter and Fig. I said I was David Mercer, that my wife had left a scarf at the restaurant during our last visit, and that I was hoping they might have it in their lost and found. The hostess was friendly. She said she'd check. When were you last here, sir? It would have been a Thursday, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. Let me look. I see a reservation under the name Mercer on July 7th. Party of 2. That's the one. Do you have the scarf? I'm sorry, I don't see anything in our lost and found. Would you like me to take your number in case it turns up? That would be great. Party of 2. Not a book club, not a group of friends, 2 people. I called Côte Brasserie next. Same approach, different lost item. This time I said it was a pair of sunglasses. Mercer, yes, I see you've dined with us several times. The most recent was June 28th, party of 2? That's right. I'm sorry, no sunglasses? Party of 2, every time. Now I needed to know who the second person was. Evidence drop number 4, the parking lot stakeout. I don't like that word. Stakeout. It makes me sound like a detective in a bad movie. But that's what it was. The following Thursday, Vanessa's book club night, I told her I had a late site inspection in Gastonia. I left the house at 5:30, drove 2 blocks away, parked on a side street with a clear view of our driveway, and waited. At 6:45, Vanessa came out the front door. She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before. Heels, full makeup, hair done. She looked like she was going to a gala, not a book club. She got in her car and pulled out of the driveway. I followed her. She drove south on Johnston Road, then east on Fairview. She turned into the parking lot of Porter and Fig at 7:05. She parked, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, and walked inside. I parked across the street. At 7:12, a silver BMW 5 Series pulled into the lot. A man got out. Tall, dark suit, probably mid-40s. He straightened his tie, checked his phone, and walked into the restaurant. I couldn't see inside from where I was parked, but I wrote down his license plate number. KJV 4782. North Carolina plates. They came out at 9:40. Together. He walked her to her car. They stood there talking for a few minutes. Then he leaned in and kissed her. Not on the cheek. On the mouth. Lingering, his hand on her waist. She kissed him back. I sat in my truck with the engine off and watched my wife kiss another man in the parking lot of a restaurant she'd been visiting for over a year on a credit card she'd opened in my name without my knowledge. My hands were on the steering wheel. I remember squeezing it until my knuckles went white. But I didn't move. I didn't get out. I didn't confront them. Because this wasn't the end of the investigation. This was the middle. I took 4 photos with my phone from across the street. The lighting wasn't perfect, but you could see them clearly enough. Then I drove home, threw away the leftover casserole she'd left for me in the fridge, and went to bed. The next morning, I sat in my office and ran the license plate. Now, I should be clear. I didn't have access to any law enforcement database. but North Carolina allows you to request certain vehicle information through the DMV with a valid reason and a small fee. I filed a request citing a parking lot incident, which was true enough in its own way. While I waited for that, I tried another route. I searched the plate number alongside Charlotte on a few public records sites, and I got a hit. The BMW was registered to a man named Grant Holloway, age 47. Address in the Myers Park neighborhood, one of the wealthiest zip codes in Charlotte. He was listed as the managing director of Pinnacle Wealth Advisors, a financial planning firm with offices on South Tryon Street. Grant Holloway. I searched his name. His LinkedIn profile was polished. Ivy League education, CFA designation, 20-plus years in wealth management. His company website showed a professional headshot. Same man I'd seen in the parking lot. Square jaw, confident smile. The kind of man who orders the most expensive wine without looking at the price. I searched for any connection between Grant Holloway and Vanessa. Nothing obvious. They weren't friends on any public social media. No shared employers. No shared organizations. But they'd been having dinner together at least once a week for the better part of 18 months. On my credit card, I saved everything: screenshots, photos, dates, amounts, plate number, name, address, company. Project integrity was growing. Evidence drop number 5. The credit card application arrives. 8 days after my call to Chase, a thick envelope arrived at my office. Inside was a printed copy of the original credit card application. It listed my name, my social security number, my date of birth, my home address, and the fake email d.mercer.personal@gmail.com. But here's what stopped me cold. The application included a digital signature, a typed name confirming the applicant's identity. The name typed was David A. Mercer. My middle initial is A for Allen. Vanessa knew that. Of course she knew that. But here's what she didn't know. When I applied for my actual Chase card years ago, I used David Mercer. No middle initial. I'd never once used my middle initial on any financial document. It was a quirk. My father's name was Allen, and I'd always kept it off official paperwork for no particular reason. That middle initial was Vanessa's fingerprint on the application. Small, almost invisible, but it was there. I photocopied the application, highlighted the middle initial, saved it. Then I called a lawyer. The authority ally, Catherine Dwyer, family law attorney. Catherine Dwyer practiced out of a small firm on East Boulevard called Dwyer and Sims. Marcus Peterson's wife, Linda, had used her for a contract dispute years ago and said she was sharp, thorough, and didn't waste time. I made an appointment for the following Monday. I told the receptionist it was a consultation regarding a marital financial matter. That was the understatement of the century. Catherine's office was on the second floor. Neat, professional, a wall of law books behind her desk that might have been decorative but somehow looked well used. She was in her 50s, gray-streaked hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked like someone who'd heard every story and believed about half of them. I sat down across from her and set the manila folder on her desk. "I need to know what my options are," I said. "Options regarding?" "My wife has been conducting an affair for approximately 18 months. She's been financing her dinners with the other man using a credit card she opened in my name without my knowledge or consent, using a fraudulent email address linked to her phone number. The current balance on the card is over $11,000. I have documentation of the account, the transactions, the fraudulent application, the reservation records, and photographic evidence of the affair." Catherine looked at me for a long moment. Then she took off her glasses, set them on the desk, and opened the folder. She was quiet for a long time. She went through every page, every screenshot, every photo. When she got to the credit card application, with the highlighted middle initial, she paused. "This is good," she said. "This is very good." "What does it mean legally?" She leaned back. "It means several things. First, opening a credit card in someone's name without their consent is identity theft under North Carolina law. It's a felony. Second, the debt she's accumulated on that card, over $11,000, is fraudulent debt. You're not liable for it, and you may have grounds to pursue criminal charges. And the affair? North Carolina is one of a handful of states that still recognizes alienation of affection as a civil tort. You can sue the third party, this Grant Holloway, for damages if you can prove he engaged in a relationship that destroyed your marriage. Given what you've documented, you likely have a strong case. What about the divorce itself? North Carolina requires a 1-year separation before divorce. But in terms of property division and alimony, this evidence is devastating to her position. She's been defrauding you. She's been unfaithful. And she's been doing both while telling you to eat leftovers. Catherine closed the folder. "Mr. Mercer, I've practiced family law for 22 years. This is one of the most methodically documented cases I've ever seen. But I need to ask you, what do you want? Do you want a quiet divorce, or do you want accountability?" I thought about that. "I want both," I said. She almost smiled. "Then we have work to do." That meeting changed the trajectory of everything. Catherine laid out a strategy, and I followed it to the letter. The key, she said, was to continue gathering evidence without tipping Vanessa off. We needed to build an airtight case before making any move. "Right now," Catherine said, "she thinks she's invisible. That's your greatest advantage. The moment she knows you know, she'll start destroying evidence, canceling cards, crafting a counter-narrative. We cannot let that happen." So I didn't. For the next 6 weeks, I lived a double life of my own, except mine was built on truth, not lies. Evidence drop number 6. The second phone. This discovery happened by accident. One Saturday morning in early August, Vanessa was in the shower. Her purse was on the kitchen counter. She'd stopped taking it to the bathroom a few days earlier, probably because she'd noticed me noticing. I wasn't planning to search it. I was standing right next to it, making coffee, when I heard a vibration. Not from Vanessa's phone, which was charging on the nightstand in the bedroom. I'd seen it there when I walked past. The vibration was coming from her purse. I reached in and felt it immediately. A second phone. Slim, no case. I pulled it out. It was an older iPhone, maybe a 7 or 8, with a cracked screen protector. The notification on the lock screen read, "Grant H. Can't wait for Thursday. Booked our table. Wearing the blue tie you like." I read it twice. Then I set the phone back exactly where I'd found it. I walked back to the coffee maker with my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. A second phone. Of course she had a second phone. That's why her primary phone was always clean. No suspicious texts, no hidden apps. The primary phone was the decoy. The second phone was the real one. I needed to get into that phone. But I couldn't take it, she'd notice. I couldn't guess the passcode. I might lock it after too many attempts. What I could do was photograph the lock screen notification every time I got the chance. Over the next 3 weeks, I managed to catch 7 notifications before they disappeared. Each one was from Grant H. Each one referenced a dinner, a restaurant, a plan. One of them said, "David still doesn't suspect a thing." "You're brilliant, V," I photographed that one 3 times to make sure it was legible. Evidence drop number 7. The financial forensics. Catherine had recommended I pull a full credit report. I did, through all 3 bureaus. The Chase Sapphire Reserve was the only fraudulent account, but the report also revealed something else I'd missed. Vanessa had been listed as an authorized user on my legitimate Chase Visa card, the one ending in 3192, since 2020. I'd authorized that myself when we got married. Normal. No issue. But when I pulled the transaction history on that card for the past 2 years, a pattern emerged. The grocery charges were there. $80 here, $120 there, consistent with what she'd told me. But mixed in were charges to places that weren't grocery stores. TJ Maxx, Nordstrom Rack, Sephora. Amazon charges that didn't correspond to any deliveries I could remember receiving. Over 24 months, those incidental charges totaled over $9,000. On top of the $11,000 on the fraudulent card, my wife had spent over $20,000 on things I didn't know about, while telling me we couldn't afford fresh groceries. Catherine's paralegal, a sharp young woman named Tomiko, helped me organize the financial records into a timeline. When she finished, she looked up at me with an expression I'd seen before. The look people give you when they've uncovered something they wish they hadn't. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "there's more." She pointed to a series of ATM withdrawals on my legitimate card. Small amounts, $40, $60, $80, but frequent, 2 or 3 per week. "These are cash withdrawals from ATMs near your home," Tomiko said. "They total over $6,000 in the past year alone." "I didn't make those withdrawals." "I know. They all occur between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. on weekdays. Your work records show you're on job sites during those hours." $6,000 in cash. Cash that went somewhere untraceable. My wife had been bleeding me from 3 directions simultaneously. The fraudulent credit card, the stealth purchases on my legitimate card, and cash withdrawals I never authorized. Total estimated financial damage, roughly $26,000. What I found made my stomach drop. Not because of the amount, though that was staggering, but because of the sophistication. This wasn't impulse spending. This was systematic extraction. She'd distributed the theft across multiple channels to keep any single one from triggering an alarm. She'd engineered this, just like I engineered buildings, except her structure was designed to take mine apart. Evidence drop number 8. The book club investigation. I needed to verify that the book club was fake, not because I had any doubt, I didn't, but because Catherine said corroborating evidence strengthened a case exponentially. "If she's been lying about where she goes," Catherine said, "and we can prove those lies with specificity, it demonstrates a pattern of conscious deception. That's powerful in front of a judge." So I did something I wasn't proud of. I called Diane. Diane Lawson was Vanessa's closest friend, or at least the one Vanessa mentioned most often. They'd supposedly known each other since college. Vanessa referenced Diane constantly. Lunches with Diane, shopping with Diane, the book club that Diane organized. I'd met Diane maybe 4 times. She was pleasant enough, quiet, bookish, the kind of person who seemed to exist at the edges of social gatherings. I had her number because Vanessa had given it to me once as an emergency contact. I called on a Tuesday afternoon. "Diane, it's David, Vanessa's husband." "Oh, David. Hi, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm planning a surprise for Vanessa's birthday next month, and I wanted to coordinate with the book club. Do you know when the next Thursday meeting is?" I don't want to schedule something that conflicts. There was a pause, a long one. David, I'm not sure what you mean. What book club? The Thursday night book club. The one you and Vanessa go to. Another pause. David, I don't go to a book club. I haven't seen Vanessa on a Thursday night in... Honestly, I'm not sure I've ever seen her on a Thursday night. We usually grab coffee on Saturday mornings. Is she... Wait, does she say we have a book club? My chest tightened. My mistake, I said, keeping my voice steady. I must have confused it with something else. Forget I mentioned it. And please don't mention this to Vanessa. I don't want to ruin the surprise. Of course, my lips are sealed. I hung up. I wrote down every word of the conversation from memory, including the timestamp. Then I saved it. The book club didn't exist. Diane didn't even know about it. Vanessa had been using her best friend's name as a cover story for her Thursday night dinners with Grant Holloway, and Diane had no idea. This isn't drama. This is a scheme. A system. I said that to Catherine at our next meeting, and she nodded. That's exactly what it is, she said, and that's how we'll present it. Not as a wife who strayed, but as a person who constructed an elaborate fraud, identity theft, financial exploitation, and systematic deception over a period of years. How long until we're ready to move? I want 2 more things. First, I want a forensic accountant to review your financial records and prepare a formal report. I have someone. His name is Wesley Chen. He's expensive, but he's the best in the state. Second, I want to confirm the relationship with Holloway through more than just photographs from across a parking lot. Can you get clearer documentation? How clear does it need to be? Clear enough that no one can claim it was a friendly dinner between colleagues. Evidence drop number 9, the restaurant confirmation. This one required a different approach. I couldn't keep following Vanessa to restaurants and taking photos from across the street. I needed something closer, something undeniable. I thought about this for 2 days, and then I thought about Marcello's. Marcello's was the restaurant from that first bank notification, the one that started everything. Looking at the credit card records, Vanessa had dined there more than any other restaurant, 14 times in 18 months. It was their place, so I made a reservation. Not for dinner. I called and asked to speak with the manager. I told him my name was David Mercer, that my wife was a frequent guest, and that I wanted to plan a special surprise for our anniversary. I said I wanted to prepay for their next dinner and have the restaurant present a special dessert course. On me. The manager was enthusiastic. Of course, Mr. Mercer. Your wife and her guest always enjoy the tasting menu. Shall I plan the dessert for both of them? Her guest? Yes, she typically dines with a gentleman. Very regular. They're lovely people. Always complimentary about the food. Right. Yes, please include the dessert for both. Wonderful. And may I confirm, will the charge go on the card we have on file? Which card do you have? The Chase Sapphire ending in 4471. There it was, from the manager's own mouth, confirming that Vanessa regularly dined there with a male guest on my fraudulent credit card. I didn't actually plan a dessert. I said I'd call back to finalize details and hung up. I wrote down the entire conversation verbatim. Date, time, the manager's first name, Roberto. Catherine had told me that contemporaneous written records carry weight in court, even if they're not recordings. In North Carolina, you can legally record a phone conversation you're a party to, and I had. I'd started recording all my calls related to this matter on a call recording app Catherine had recommended. That recording went into the Project Integrity folder. Evidence drop number 10. Wesley Chen's forensic report. Wesley Chen was a small, precise man with wire-rimmed glasses and the demeanor of someone who finds beauty in spreadsheets. He worked out of a sparse office near uptown Charlotte, and when I handed him my financial records, he treated them with the reverence of a librarian handling a rare manuscript. It took him 3 weeks to compile his report. When he called me in to review it, I sat across from his desk while he walked me through 52 pages of analysis. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "your wife has extracted approximately $31,400 from your accounts over a period of 27 months. 31,000? The number increased since your initial estimate because I identified several additional charges that were obscured through category mismatches. For example, there are multiple charges listed as grocery on your authorized card that actually correspond to a gourmet food delivery service called Culinary Dash. This service delivers restaurant-quality prepared meals. She was ordering from high-end restaurants through a third-party app and having the charges categorized as grocery purchases. I stared at him. She was having gourmet food delivered. To where? The delivery addresses alternate between your home and an address on Selwyn Avenue. What's on Selwyn Avenue? Wesley checked his notes. It appears to be a residential address. I wasn't able to confirm the occupant. I didn't need him to confirm it. I already knew. I checked later that evening. Grant Holloway's home address, listed in the public records I'd already found, was on Selwyn Avenue in Myers Park. She was having gourmet meals delivered to her boyfriend's house, on my credit card, while I ate 4-day-old leftovers. Wesley's report documented every transaction, organized by date, amount, category, and fraudulence rating. He classified 31,400 in charges as unauthorized or fraudulently obtained. He prepared the report in a format suitable for legal proceedings. I paid his fee, $2,800. Worth every penny. The midpoint reframe. I need to pause here, because this is where the story changes shape. Up until now, you might be thinking this is about a man catching his wife cheating. It's not. The affair was bad. Of course it was. But the affair was almost secondary. What this was really about was financial predation. Vanessa hadn't just cheated on me. She'd constructed a parallel financial life using my identity, my credit, and my money. She'd committed identity theft. She'd engaged in ongoing fraud. She'd manipulated me psychologically. The budget lectures, the guilt trips about food costs, the constant narrative of scarcity, to keep me from looking at the numbers. This wasn't a marriage that went wrong. This was an operation. And I was the target. That realization changed how I felt about everything. The anger didn't go away, but it crystallized into something colder and more useful. I wasn't a betrayed husband anymore. I was a man building a case, and the case was almost complete. Almost. Evidence drop number 11. Grant Holloway's connection. Catherine had said she wanted more on Holloway. I delivered. Through public records and some careful research, I discovered that Grant Holloway had been divorced twice. His second divorce, finalized in 2019, had included an allegation of alienation of affection by his ex-wife against a woman he'd been seeing. The case settled out of court. This was a man with a history. More importantly, I discovered that Vanessa's medical billing clinic, South Charlotte Medical Group, had contracted with Pinnacle Wealth Advisors for employee retirement planning services in early 2020. That was the connection. Vanessa and Grant had likely met through a professional channel and started their relationship under the cover of that connection. Catherine was pleased. This establishes how they met and when. It also means he knew she was married from the beginning. He knew I existed from the beginning. Yes, and that's relevant to the alienation of affection claim. He can't argue he didn't know. Evidence drop number 12. The text message breakthrough. This was the one that almost broke me. I'd been photographing lock screen notifications from Vanessa's second phone whenever I could, which wasn't often. She was careful with it. But in late August, something shifted in her behavior. She became more relaxed, more careless. Maybe she felt invincible. Maybe she'd been doing this so long without getting caught that she'd stopped worrying. One Sunday morning, she went for a run. She left both phones on the kitchen counter. Her main phone was locked, as always. But the second phone, the burner, she'd left it unlocked. She must have been reading messages right before she left and didn't bother to lock it. I had maybe 30 minutes. I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking. The only time in this entire process that my hands shook. The text thread with Grant H. was open. I scrolled. There were hundreds of messages. I couldn't read them all, but I photographed every screen, scrolling as fast as I could, capturing as much as possible. I got about 60 screenshots before I heard the front door open and had to set the phone down. That night, after Vanessa fell asleep, I went through the screenshots. Most of the messages were what you'd expect. Plans for dinners, expressions of affection, the mundane logistics of an affair. But scattered throughout were messages that went beyond romance into something much darker. One message from Vanessa, dated April 2022. He asked about the grocery budget again. I shut it down, told him he was being ungrateful. He won't ask again. He never pushes back. Grant's response: "You've got him trained. LOL. My treat this Thursday?" Vanessa: "Your treat on his card." I set down my phone. I walked to the bathroom. I stood over the sink and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. He won't ask again. He never pushes back. That's what she thought of me. That's what she told her boyfriend about me. That I was trained. That I was docile. That I was so desperate to be a good husband that I'd eat garbage and say thank you. And she was right. For 3 years, she'd been right. Then I heard the sentence that changed everything, except it wasn't a sentence someone said to me. It was a sentence I said to myself, standing in that bathroom at 2 a.m, looking at my own reflection. They thought I was finished. I wasn't. The next morning, I called Catherine. "I have the texts," I said. "How many?" 60 screenshots, including messages where she explicitly discusses the fraud and mocks me for not noticing. Catherine was quiet for a moment. "Bring them to my office today." "David, this changes everything. Those messages aren't just evidence of an affair. They're evidence of conscious, deliberate financial fraud with expressed intent and awareness." In her own words. "I know. We're ready." "Almost," I said. "There's one more thing I want to do." The threat. Before I could set the final plan in motion, Vanessa made a move that accelerated everything. It was the first week of September. I came home on a Monday evening and found Vanessa sitting at the kitchen table with a folder of papers. She looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a blend of sympathy and authority, like a doctor about to deliver bad news. "David, we need to talk." I sat down. "About what?" "About our finances. I've been looking at our accounts and I'm worried. We're not in as strong a position as you think." She opened the folder. Inside were printed bank statements, my bank statements from our joint account, with certain figures highlighted in yellow. "We have less in savings than we should," she said. "I think we need to make some changes. I want to add my name to the deed of the house." I looked at her. The house is in my name, I said. I bought it before we were married. I know that. But we're married now, and I've been contributing to its upkeep. The lawn service, the cleaning, the maintenance. It's our home. It should be in both our names. Vanessa, adding your name to the deed is a significant legal step. Why now? She tilted her head, that same sympathetic look. Because I want us to be equal partners, David. I don't want to feel like I'm living in your house. I want to feel like it's ours. She said this while sitting at the table where I'd eaten 4-day-old leftovers for 3 years. She said this while carrying a burner phone in her purse that was full of messages to her boyfriend. She said this while $11,000 of fraudulent debt sat on a credit card she'd opened in my name, and she expected me to sign over half my house. Let me think about it, I said. What's there to think about? Don't you trust me? That line. That exact line. Don't you trust me? The same weapon she'd used 100 times. The guilt trip wrapped in a question. The implication that hesitation equals betrayal. I stayed calm. I needed proof of this conversation too. I just want to review it with our accountant first, I said. Standard due diligence. We don't have an accountant. Then maybe we should get one. She didn't like that answer. Her expression hardened for just a fraction of a second, a crack in the mask that she smoothed over almost instantly. Fine, she said. But don't take too long. I've already spoken to a real estate attorney about the process. She'd spoken to an attorney about putting her name on my house. The next morning, something was different. I felt it the moment I woke up. The pretense was over, at least on my side. She was making her move, trying to get her name on my property before I discovered anything. Maybe she sensed a shift. Maybe Grant had advised her to secure the asset. Either way, the timeline had compressed. I called Catherine from my truck. She wants her name on my deed. Absolutely not. Do not sign anything. I wasn't going to. Good. This is actually helpful. It shows escalation. She's trying to convert her position from financial fraud into legal ownership. That's consciousness of guilt, David. She knows this house is the big asset, and she's trying to lock it down. How soon can we move? I can have everything ready in 2 weeks, but I need you to decide something first. What? The criminal referral. If you want to pursue identity theft charges, I need to coordinate with the DA's office before we file for divorce. Once she's served with divorce papers, she'll lawyer up and start erasing her tracks. If the criminal case is going to happen, it needs to be in motion first. I thought about this for exactly 1 day. Do it, I said. Catherine made a call to a contact in the Mecklenburg County District Attorney's Office, an assistant DA named Russell Park, who handled financial crimes. She sent him a summary of the evidence: the fraudulent credit card application, the fake email linked to Vanessa's phone, the transaction records, Wesley Chen's forensic report, and the text messages showing conscious intent. Russell Park called me directly 2 days later. Mr. Mercer, I've reviewed the materials your attorney provided. This is a clear-cut case of identity theft and financial fraud. I'd like to move forward with a referral to our financial crimes unit. How does that work alongside a divorce proceeding? They're separate tracks, but they can run in parallel. My recommendation is that we initiate the criminal investigation quietly. We won't arrest or charge immediately. We'll build the file, secure warrants for the relevant financial records, and have everything ready. When you're ready to file for divorce, we can coordinate the timing. And Grant Holloway? We're looking at him too. If he knowingly benefited from the fraudulent card, and the text messages suggest he did, He could face charges as an accessory. I thanked him, hung up. The machine was in motion. Over the next 2 weeks, the pieces came together. Catherine prepared the divorce petition, citing fraud, infidelity, and identity theft. She drafted the alienation of affection lawsuit against Grant Holloway. She coordinated with Russell Park's office on timing. Wesley Chen prepared a supplemental financial report documenting the total damages. $31,400 in unauthorized charges, plus estimated interest and fees. Tomiko organized every piece of evidence into a master binder. 3 copies, 1 for Catherine, 1 for the DA, 1 for me. And I made one final preparation that I hadn't told anyone about. Evidence drop number 13, the Marcello's plan. I called Roberto at Marcello's, the same manager I'd spoken to before. Roberto, it's David Mercer. We spoke a few weeks ago about a surprise for my wife. Yes, Mr. Mercer. Are we ready to plan the dessert? Change of plans. I'd like to do something different. My wife usually makes reservations under the name Mercer for Thursday evenings, correct? Yes, typically for 2. I'd like to arrange something for their next visit. Instead of a surprise dessert, I'd like the check to be presented in a specific way. Can you deliver a sealed envelope to my wife's table at the end of the meal, along with the regular check? Roberto hesitated. An envelope? It's a personal matter. The envelope will contain a card, a message from me to her. I want it to be presented with the check, so she receives it at the end of the evening. I suppose we could do that. Is everything all right, Mr. Mercer? It will be. I dropped off the envelope at Marcello's the following day. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Printed on it was a copy of the first page of the credit card application, the one with the fake email and the David A. Mercer signature, alongside a screenshot of the text message where Vanessa had written, "Your treat," on his card. At the bottom of the page, in my handwriting, I'd written 3 words, "I know everything." But the envelope wasn't the play. The envelope was the trigger. The actual plan, the one Catherine and I had spent 2 weeks designing, was bigger. The Thursday after I dropped off the envelope was September 22nd. Vanessa had already told me she'd be at book club that evening. She left the house at 6:30 in the black dress. I watched her pull out of the driveway from the upstairs window. Then I put on my suit and drove to Marcello's. I arrived at the restaurant at 7:15. The plan had multiple moving parts, and every one of them had to work in sequence. Catherine and I had gone over it 3 times. Russell Park had been briefed. Even Roberto, the restaurant manager, had been given a limited version of what was about to happen. Limited, because I didn't want him to refuse. Here's what the plan looked like. Step 1. Vanessa and Grant would dine at Marcello's, as they did most Thursdays. Step 2. At the end of the meal, Roberto would present the check along with the sealed envelope. Step 3. While Vanessa was reading the contents of the envelope, while she was off balance, confused, panicking, I would approach the table. Step 4. I would present her with the divorce papers. Catherine had arranged for me to act as the delivery mechanism, which was legal in North Carolina as long as a third-party witness was present. That witness was already in the restaurant, a process server named Dale Kinnick, who was sitting at the bar in a gray sport coat, nursing a club soda, and looking like any other diner. Step 5. At the same time, Russell Park's investigator would be in the parking lot, waiting for Grant Holloway to leave, at which point he'd be served with the alienation of affection lawsuit. Step 6. The credit card ending in 4471 would be declined. I'd called Chase that morning and had a fraud hold placed on the account, effective at 8 p.m. When the server ran the card, it would come back declined. Vanessa would have no way to pay for the meal, except I'd already paid for it. I'd called Roberto and prepaid the bill, cash, that afternoon. I didn't want the restaurant caught in the middle, but Vanessa wouldn't know that. As far as she'd know, the card was dead, and she was trapped. I parked my truck 2 blocks away and walked to the restaurant. My pulse was steady. My breathing was even. I'd rehearsed this in my head 100 times. I walked into Marcello's at 7:18. Roberto met me at the host stand. He looked nervous. "Mr. Mercer, they're at table 9. They've just finished the 3rd course." "How many courses in the tasting menu?" 7. "When does the check usually come?" "After the 7th course, around 9:15. "I'll be at the bar until then." I sat next to Dale Kinnick. He gave me a nod, nothing more. I ordered a sparkling water and I waited. The next 90 minutes were the longest of my life. From my seat at the bar, I couldn't see table 9 directly. It was around a corner in the semi-private section. But I could see the path the waiters took to reach it. I could see wine glasses being ferried back and forth. I could hear, faintly, the murmur of conversation and the occasional burst of laughter. Her laughter. I knew that laugh. I'd fallen in love with that laugh, and now it was someone else's. I sipped my water. At 8:45, Roberto caught my eye from across the room. He held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes to dessert course. At 8:52, the dessert was served. I saw the waiter carry 2 plates past the bar. Chocolate something. It didn't matter. At 9:08, Roberto approached table 9 with the check presenter. I watched him set it down. Then I watched him produce a white envelope, my envelope, and place it next to the check. "A personal delivery for Mrs. Mercer," he said. I was close enough now to hear him. I'd moved from the bar to a standing position near the entrance to the semi-private section, partially concealed by a pillar. I heard Vanessa's voice. "What is this?" "It was left for you, ma'am." A pause, the sound of paper unfolding. Silence. A long silence. Then, "What the—" Her voice dropped to a hiss. I couldn't make out the next few words, but the tone was unmistakable. Panic. Grant's voice, low and confused. "What is it? Vanessa, what's wrong?" "We need to go. We need to go right now." "What are you—" "Let me see that." "Don't! Grant, don't!" I stepped around the pillar. I walked to table 9. They saw me at the same moment. Vanessa's face went white. Not pale, white. Like the blood had been physically drained from her skin. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She was holding the paper from the envelope in both hands, and it was shaking. Grant Holloway looked at me, then at Vanessa, then back at me. He didn't know who I was. "Vanessa?" he said. "Who is this?" I pulled a chair from an empty neighboring table, set it at the end of their booth, and sat down. "My name is David Mercer," I said. "I'm Vanessa's husband." Grant's face did something complicated. It went from confusion to recognition to alarm in about 2 seconds. "David," Vanessa started. "Don't." I held up my hand. Not aggressively, calmly. "I'm not here to yell. I'm not here to make a scene. I'm here to deliver something." I reached into my jacket and produced the manila envelope, the thick one I'd been carrying since I walked in. I set it on the table in front of Vanessa. "These are divorce papers," I said. "You've been served." Dale Kinnick appeared at the edge of the table. He set a second copy down and produced a small notepad. "Ma'am, my name is Dale Kinnick. I'm a licensed process server in the state of North Carolina. You have been formally served with a petition for divorce, including claims of fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation. The documents include a request for a protective order on all joint financial accounts and a motion for exclusive possession of the marital residence. Please sign here to acknowledge receipt. Vanessa didn't move. She doesn't need to sign, I said to Dale. Service is complete upon delivery in the presence of a witness. Dale nodded. Confirmed. Service completed at 9:14 p.m. on September 22nd. He made a note and stepped back. The restaurant had gone quiet. Not completely, there were other diners. But the tables nearest to us had noticed something happening. A few people had turned to look. A waiter stood frozen mid-stride, holding a bread basket. Grant Holloway found his voice. Listen, I don't know what you think. Grant. I turned to him. I know exactly what I think. I know your name, your address, your company, your divorce history, and your license plate number. I know you've been having an affair with my wife for approximately 20 months. I know you've dined at this restaurant with her 14 times, at Porter and Fig 11 times, at Côte Brasserie 9 times, and at various other establishments throughout Charlotte. All of these meals were charged to a Chase Sapphire Reserve credit card that was opened fraudulently in my name by my wife using a fake email address linked to her phone number. I paused. I also know that on April 15th of this year, you texted my wife the words. I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshot. David still doesn't suspect a thing. You're brilliant, V. To which she responded, your treat on his card, followed by a laughing emoji. Grant's face had gone from alarmed to ashen. You're going to be served with a civil lawsuit for alienation of affection, I continued. The papers are being delivered to you as we speak, or they will be when you walk to your car. I'd recommend you call your attorney. This is, you can't, I can, and I have. North Carolina is one of 6 states that recognizes alienation of affection as a cause of action. Given your history, including the similar allegation in your 2019 divorce, I'd say you're familiar with the concept. Grant Holloway's jaw tightened. He looked at Vanessa. She looked at the table. I turned back to my wife. The credit card has been frozen, I said. A fraud hold was placed on the account at 8 p.m. tonight. The Mecklenburg County District Attorney's Financial Crimes Unit has been investigating the identity theft for the past 2 weeks. You may be contacted by an investigator named Russell Park. David. Vanessa's voice was barely a whisper. David, please let me explain. Explain what? The fake email address? The 18 months of restaurant charges? The text messages on your burner phone? The cash withdrawals? The gourmet deliveries to his house? She flinched at each item like she was being struck. Or maybe you'd like to explain why you asked me to sign my house over to you last week. Was that Grant's idea or yours? Silence. Shaktitel. I have a forensic accountant's report documenting $31,400 in unauthorized charges. I have the original credit card application with a digital signature using my middle initial, an initial I've never used on any financial document, which is how I know you filled it out. I have reservation records from 4 restaurants confirming party of 2 dinners on nights you told me you were at a book club that doesn't exist. I called Diane, by the way. She was surprised to learn she'd been attending a Thursday night book club for the past 2 years. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. And I have 60 screenshots from your second phone. The iPhone you keep in your purse. The one linked to Grant's number. Including messages where you discuss the fraud, mock me for not noticing, and plan your evenings out in detail. I leaned forward. You told him I was trained, Vanessa. You told him I never push back. Her tears spilled over. She pressed her hand to her mouth. You were right. For 3 years, I didn't push back. I ate the leftovers. I believed the budget story. I trusted you. I stood up. But I push back now. The waiter approached with the check presenter. He looked terrified. The poor young man had no idea what he'd walked into. Sir, ma'am, the card on file has been declined. Vanessa just stared at the table. The bill has been paid, I said to the waiter. I settled it this afternoon with Roberto. Cash. The waiter looked confused but relieved. He retreated. I buttoned my jacket. Vanessa, you have 30 days to vacate the house. That's in the filing. The house is my separate property, purchased before the marriage, titled solely in my name. Catherine Dwyer is my attorney. Her contact information is in the packet. I turned to Grant. Mr. Holloway, I'd recommend you don't leave the state. The DA's office may want to discuss your knowledge of and participation in the financial fraud. Grant's mouth moved, but nothing came out. I picked up my sparkling water from the bar on my way past. I drank the last sip, set the glass down, and I walked out of Marcello's. The parking lot was cool. September in Charlotte, that transitional air where summer is releasing its grip but hasn't quite let go. I stood by my truck and breathed. Dale Kinnick came out a minute later. She's still sitting there, hasn't moved. And Holloway? He just left the table, heading for the door. Frank's got the papers ready. Frank was the second process server, stationed in the parking lot for exactly this purpose. I watched through the glass doors as Grant Holloway pushed through the restaurant entrance, his face rigid, his stride purposeful, the walk of a man trying to project control. He made it about 20 feet across the parking lot before Frank Delano stepped into his path. Mr. Holloway? What? You've been served? Frank handed him the alienation of affection complaint. Grant looked at the papers, then looked up, scanning the parking lot until his eyes found me. I was leaning against my truck, arms crossed. We looked at each other for maybe 5 seconds. Then he got in his BMW and drove away. First false victory for the antagonist. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:15. It was a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Mercer, this is Todd Brennan. I'm an attorney representing Vanessa Mercer. That was fast. She'd lawyered up overnight. Mr. Mercer, I'm calling to inform you that your wife disputes the allegations in your divorce petition. She maintains that the credit card was opened with your verbal consent and that the charges were for shared marital expenses. She further contends that the so-called affair was a platonic business relationship. A platonic business relationship. That's correct. Mr. Brennan, has your client shown you the text messages from her second phone? The ones where she discusses the fraud in detail? Or the message where she says, your treat on his card with a laughing emoji? A brief pause. I'm not going to discuss specific evidence over the phone. Then discuss it with Catherine Dwyer. She has the full file. And you might want to ask your client about the identity theft investigation being conducted by the Mecklenburg County DA's office. She's going to need a criminal attorney in addition to a family law attorney. You might want to recommend one. I hung up. Second false victory for the antagonist. 3 days later, Catherine called me. Vanessa's attorney has filed a counter motion. She's claiming the house is marital property because she contributed to its maintenance during the marriage, and she's requesting temporary spousal support pending the divorce. She's claiming the house and support. She's arguing that she gave up career advancement opportunities to manage the household, the grocery shopping, the cooking, the home maintenance, and that she's entitled to equitable distribution. She managed the household by feeding me leftovers and stealing $31,000. I know, and the judge will know too. But she has the right to file the motion, and we have to respond to it. This is a delay tactic, David. Her attorney knows the evidence is devastating. He's trying to buy time, hoping you'll settle. I won't settle. I didn't think you would. I've already prepared our response. We're attaching Wesley Chen's full forensic report, the credit card application, the email recovery evidence, the text message screenshots, and the recording of the Marcello's manager confirming the dinners. I've also subpoenaed Diane Lawson as a witness to testify that the book club never existed. When's the hearing? October 12th. The weeks between the Marcello's confrontation and the hearing were strange. Vanessa moved into the guest bedroom. She didn't speak to me. She communicated through her attorney, formal letters about the disposition of certain items, requests for access to the kitchen during specific hours, that sort of thing. It was absurd. We were living in the same house, 15 feet apart, and communicating through legal correspondence. I maintained my routine. I went to work. I came home. I cooked my own meals now, fresh meals with actual ingredients. The first time I made a stir-fry with fresh vegetables and seared salmon, I stood at the stove and almost laughed. This was what I'd been denied for 3 years. Not because we couldn't afford it. We always could. But because the lie required my deprivation. One evening, Vanessa broke the silence. I was in the living room reading a report when she appeared in the doorway. David, I looked up. I'm sorry. I set down the report. For which part? For all of it. I know I messed up. I know what I did was wrong. But you have to understand. I was unhappy. You were always working. You were never here. Grant made me feel seen. Vanessa, I worked 12-hour days so we could live comfortably in a house I paid for. You responded by stealing my identity and spending $31,000 on dinners with another man while telling me we couldn't afford bell peppers. I didn't plan it. You created a fake email address. You applied for a credit card using that email and my social security number. You maintained a second phone. You invented a book club. You had gourmet food delivered to his house on my card. This wasn't something that just happened. This was a project. You ran it for 2 years. She looked at the floor. I'm not going to fight you on the house, she said quietly. Todd says I should, but I won't. Your attorney's counter motion says otherwise. I'll tell him to withdraw it. Why? She looked up. Her eyes were red. Because I know what you have. I know what's in that folder. And I know what's going to happen if this goes in front of a judge. What's going to happen? Everything comes out. The card, the texts, the restaurants, all of it. In public. On the record. That's correct. David, please. Can't we handle this privately? A settlement. I'll give up the house claim. I'll agree to the divorce. I'll pay back whatever I can. Just, please don't make it public. I looked at her for a long time. You ate $300 dinners in restaurants I didn't know existed, while I ate leftovers in my own kitchen. You told your boyfriend I was trained. You tried to put your name on my deed 2 weeks before I caught you. I paused. You don't get to negotiate the consequences, Vanessa. That's not how this works. She stood in the doorway for another moment. Then she turned and walked back to the guest bedroom. I heard the door close. I picked up my report and kept reading. The hearing. October 12th. The Mecklenburg County Courthouse is on East 4th Street in Uptown Charlotte. I'd driven past it 1,000 times and never been inside. Catherine met me in the lobby at 8:30. She was carrying the master binder, the one Tomiko had organized, and a smaller folder with supplementary exhibits. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Ready?" "Good." The judge is Margaret Liu. She's been on the bench for 11 years. She's thorough, she's fair, and she does not tolerate fraud. If there's a judge in this county I'd want for this case, it's her. We went through security and found our courtroom. Vanessa was already there with Todd Brennan, a youngish attorney in a too-new suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Vanessa was in a conservative gray dress, her hair pulled back, no jewelry. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished. She didn't look at me. The hearing was for the temporary motions, Vanessa's request for spousal support and her claim to the house, and our counter-motion to dismiss both and establish my exclusive possession of the property. Todd Brennan went first. He presented Vanessa's case in the most favorable light possible. A devoted wife who had managed the household, contributed to the home's upkeep, and found herself in a marriage that had grown distant. He mentioned nothing about the credit card, nothing about the affair, nothing about the fraud. He was trying to keep it clean. Catherine went next. She stood up, opened the binder, and dismantled everything. She started with the credit card application. She showed the judge the document, the fake email, the forged digital signature with the telltale middle initial. She explained, methodically, that Vanessa had committed identity theft to open a line of credit in my name. Then she showed the transaction records. 147 restaurant charges over 18 months. She had them organized chronologically in a spreadsheet with dates, amounts, and establishment names. Then she played the recording of Roberto at Marcello's, confirming that Vanessa dined regularly with a male guest and charged the meals to the fraudulent card. Then she introduced Wesley Chen's forensic report, the full 52 pages, documenting $31,400 in unauthorized charges across multiple channels. Then she showed the text messages, the ones where Vanessa discussed the fraud, the one where she called me trained, the one with the laughing emoji. Then she noted, almost casually, that the Mecklenburg County District Attorney's Office had an active investigation into the identity theft, and that Vanessa could face felony charges. Judge Liu's expression didn't change throughout any of this. She read each document carefully, asked clarifying questions, and made notes. But when Catherine finished, the judge looked at Todd Brennan with an expression that can only be described as pointed. "Mr. Brennan, were you aware of this evidence when you filed the counter-motion?" Brennan looked ill. "Your Honor, my client has a different characterization of—" "Mr. Brennan, were you aware?" "I was aware of some allegations, Your Honor." "My client maintains that the credit card was opened with Mr. Mercer's implicit consent." "Implicit consent to commit identity theft using a fraudulently created email address?" Judge Liu's voice was even, but the words landed like hammers. Brennan said nothing. Judge Liu turned to Vanessa. "Mrs. Mercer, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Did you create the email address d.mercer.personal@gmail.com?" Vanessa's attorney started to speak, but Judge Liu held up her hand. "I'm asking her." Vanessa looked at her attorney. He gave a barely perceptible nod. "Yes," Vanessa said. Her voice was barely audible. "And did you use that email address to apply for a credit card in your husband's name without his knowledge?" A long pause. "Yes." And did you use that credit card to pay for meals at restaurants over a period of approximately 18 months? Yes. Judge Liu looked at her notes for a moment. Mrs. Mercer's motion for temporary spousal support is denied. Her claim to the marital residence is denied. The property at... She checked the filing. The Ballantine address was purchased by Mr. Mercer prior to the marriage and is titled solely in his name. Mrs. Mercer has presented no evidence of financial contribution to the property's acquisition and has, by her own admission, engaged in financial fraud against the property's owner. She paused. Mr. Mercer is granted exclusive possession of the residence effective immediately. Mistress Mercer is ordered to vacate within 14 days. The question of equitable distribution of other marital assets will be addressed at the final hearing. But I will note for the record that the evidence presented today will be a significant factor in that determination. She closed her folder. This court is adjourned. The silence after a courtroom ruling is unlike any other silence. It's the sound of consequences arriving. Vanessa sat motionless. Todd Brennan leaned toward her and whispered something, probably an assessment of how badly this had gone. She didn't respond. Catherine gathered her materials. She caught my eye and gave me a single nod. We walked out of the courtroom into the hallway. Through the glass windows, Charlotte's skyline was lit up in the mid-morning sun. The Bank of America Tower, the Duke Energy Building. Structures designed to bear weight, designed to stand. That went well, Catherine said. What happens next? The divorce itself will move forward on the standard timeline. North Carolina requires 1 year of separation. But in practical terms, the judge's ruling today has established the foundation. Vanessa has no claim to the house. She has no grounds for spousal support given the fraud. And the criminal case is building. And Holloway? The alienation of affection lawsuit was served. His attorney has filed a motion to dismiss, which we'll oppose. Given his history, the prior allegation in his 2019 divorce, I'm confident the case will proceed. The final thread, the criminal case. 3 weeks after the hearing, Russell Park called me. Mr. Mercer, I wanted to update you. We've completed our investigation. The evidence supports charges of identity theft, a Class G felony in North Carolina, and obtaining property by false pretenses. We've also identified Mr. Holloway as a potential co-conspirator, specifically regarding the deliveries to his address using the fraudulent card. When will charges be filed? We're presenting to a grand jury next week. If they return an indictment, and based on the evidence, I expect they will, warrants will be issued. Thank you, Mr. Park. Thank you, Mr. Mercer. Your documentation made this case straightforward. I wish all our investigations had this level of evidentiary support. I hung up. An engineer builds with precision. That's what we do. The grand jury returned the indictment on November 3rd. Vanessa was charged with 1 count of identity theft and 1 count of obtaining property by false pretenses. Grant Holloway was charged as an accessory. Vanessa was arrested at her new apartment. She'd moved out of the house in late October into a rental in the University City area. She posted bail the same day. Todd Brennan was replaced by a criminal defense attorney named Margaret Osei, who was, by all accounts, very good at her job. Grant Holloway's arrest was more dramatic. He was taken into custody at his office at Pinnacle Wealth Advisors, in front of his colleagues and staff. According to Catherine, who heard it from Russell Park, he was escorted out of the building in handcuffs during the lunch hour. His firm issued a statement that afternoon, announcing his immediate leave of absence pending resolution of a personal legal matter. 2 weeks later, Pinnacle Wealth Advisors terminated his employment. The alienation of affection lawsuit settled in January. Grant Holloway's attorney negotiated aggressively, but Catherine had the evidence, and they both knew it. The settlement amount was $140,000, paid by Holloway to me as damages for the destruction of my marriage. Holloway wrote the check himself. Catherine told me his hands were shaking when he signed it. The criminal case against Vanessa concluded in March. She pleaded no contest to a reduced charge of misdemeanor fraud. Her attorney negotiated down from the felony by arguing first-time offender status and cooperation. She was sentenced to 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, and full restitution of the $31,400 documented in Wesley Chen's report. She was also required to surrender the burner phone to the DA's office as evidence. Grant Holloway's accessory charge was dropped as part of the same plea negotiation. The DA's office had used it primarily as leverage to secure Vanessa's cooperation and ensure she didn't recant or obstruct. The divorce was finalized in September of the following year, 1 year and 1 day after the separation, per North Carolina's mandatory waiting period. The terms were straightforward. I retained full ownership of the house. There was no spousal support. The marital assets, a joint savings account containing about $18,000, were divided, but Vanessa's share was offset by the restitution she owed, meaning she received essentially nothing. She signed the papers without contesting them. The last time I saw her was in Catherine's office on the day the divorce was finalized. She came in, signed where Todd Brennan, she'd switched back to him for the divorce, indicated, and stood up to leave. At the door, she turned. "David?" I looked at her. "I know you won't believe this, but I did love you, at the beginning." I didn't say anything. She left. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Catherine looked at me. "How do you feel?" I thought about it. "Like a building that's been re-leveled," I said. "Solid, but different." She almost smiled. That's the most engineer answer I've ever heard. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was sitting on the back deck of my house, grilling salmon on a Saturday evening. Fresh salmon, wild caught, from the good fish counter at Harris Teeter. I'd made a marinade from scratch: soy, ginger, garlic, a little honey. I had a cold beer in one hand and the tongs in the other, and the dogwood tree in the backyard was just starting to turn. Marcus and Linda came over for dinner. Brian from work was there too, with his wife Christine. We ate on the deck under string lights I'd hung that afternoon. We had the salmon, roasted vegetables, a salad with actual fresh greens, and a lemon tart that Christine had brought from a bakery in Noda. Nobody mentioned Vanessa. Nobody mentioned the divorce. We just ate and talked and laughed. After they left, I cleaned up and sat back down on the deck with a second beer. The neighborhood was quiet. A dog barked somewhere. The air smelled like late spring. I thought about what I'd learned, not the evidence. I'd cataloged all of that, filed it, put it away. I thought about the bigger lesson, the one that doesn't fit in a manila envelope. Here's what I know now. Trust is not the same thing as blindness. I trusted Vanessa, and trust is good. Trust is necessary. Trust is the foundation of any relationship. But somewhere along the way, my trust became a refusal to see. I stopped asking questions. I stopped looking at the numbers. I stopped trusting my own instincts when something felt wrong. The restaurant receipt in the trash. The loyalty card in her purse. The constant narrative about budgets that didn't add up. I saw the cracks, and I called them cosmetic. A good engineer doesn't do that. A good engineer investigates every anomaly because small cracks become structural failures. And what happened in my marriage was a structural failure, one that could have been caught earlier if I'd been willing to look. That's not self-blame. Vanessa made her choices. She built the lie. She maintained it for years with skill and deliberation. The responsibility for the fraud is hers entirely. But the lesson for me is about vigilance. Not suspicion, vigilance. There's a difference. Suspicion is assuming the worst. Vigilance is paying attention. It's checking the load when something doesn't feel right. It's trusting your training, your experience, your gut. I didn't do that. And it cost me 3 years and a marriage. There's one more thing I want to tell you. About 3 months after the divorce, I was at the grocery store. Harris Teeter, the one on Rhea Road. I was in the produce section, picking out bell peppers, red, yellow, green, all of them, when a woman next to me laughed. "You look like you're choosing a bouquet," she said. I looked at her. She was about my age, brown hair, warm smile, a cart full of what appeared to be actual groceries. "I'm making stir-fry," I said, "and I'm not being conservative about it." She laughed again. I respect that. Her name was Elena. She taught physics at a high school in Mint Hill. We talked for 10 minutes in the produce aisle, which turned into 15, which turned into an exchange of phone numbers. I'm not going to tell you it's a love story. Not yet. It's too early for that. But I will tell you this. On our second date, we went to a restaurant, a nice one. We sat across from each other and ordered whatever we wanted. And when the check came, I picked it up, with a card I knew about from an account I controlled, for a meal I chose to share. That felt like freedom. I think about Vanessa sometimes, not with anger, not with love either. More like you think about a storm after it passes. You remember the damage, you respect its force, but you don't live in it anymore. The last I heard, she'd moved to Raleigh. She was working at a different medical billing company. She was completing her community service hours at a food bank, which struck me as either ironic or appropriate, depending on how you looked at it. Grant Holloway left Charlotte after his firm terminated him. I heard he relocated to Florida. Whether he's still in wealth management, I don't know. I stopped caring. The credit card, the Chase Sapphire Reserve ending in 4471, was closed. The account was expunged from my credit report after I filed the fraud affidavit. The $11,642 balance was zeroed out. It was like it never existed, except it did exist. And the fact that it existed, the fact that for 18 months, a piece of plastic in my name was paying for meals I never ate, in restaurants I'd never seen, with a man I didn't know, that will always be part of my story. But it's not the whole story. The whole story includes the moment I saw the bank notification and chose to investigate instead of ignore. The moment I created the Project Integrity folder and started treating the deception like what it was, a structural problem that could be diagnosed, documented, and resolved. The moment I walked into Marcello's with the envelope and sat down at that table and said, calmly, clearly, without shouting, "I know everything." That's the part of the story I keep. I'll leave you with this. If something in your life doesn't add up, if the numbers don't match, if the explanations feel rehearsed, if you're eating leftovers while someone else is feasting, pay attention. Don't accuse. Don't explode. Don't confront without evidence. Just pay attention. Open the folder. Check the receipts. Ask the question you're afraid to ask. And if the answer confirms your worst suspicion, don't panic. Document, organize, seek professional help, legal, financial, whatever you need. Build your case the way you'd build anything that has to withstand pressure. Carefully, precisely, with redundancy at every critical point. Because the truth is a structure, and if you build it right, it will hold. Now, one last thing before I go. I told you this story because someone needs to hear it. Maybe you're in a marriage where the math doesn't work. Maybe you've been told you're ungrateful for wanting more than scraps. Maybe someone is using your trust as a weapon against you. If that's you, I see you. And I'm telling you, you're not crazy. You're not ungrateful. You're not weak. You're just not looking yet. Start looking. And if this story helped, if it made you think, or made you check your credit report, or made you ask a question you've been avoiding, let me know. Drop a comment, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. My name is David Mercer. I'm 46 years old. I'm a structural engineer, and I don't eat leftovers anymore.